Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back here on another episode of EdUp here at AT23 in Nashville at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel and Resort. And where are we? We are in the AT studio broadcasting live, and it's packed. There's lots of people rolling around here. We've got Erin over here. She's sitting in the audience. She's the only person in the audience cheering for us right now. But that's okay. We're still going to podcast. We've got an amazing guest in front of us, and we want to get to her because she has one incredible, amazing, outstanding background. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. She's Dr. Susan Aldridge. She's a senior executive higher education consultant. Susan, how are you?
I'm very well. Nice to be with you today.
Did you know you were going to get an applause right away?
No.
Okay, well, congratulations. You did.
I always pray for one at the end.
Me
Well
too.
played.
That's why I have the button, because I give them to myself. Susan, you have one incredible background in higher ed. You've spent a lot of years in higher education. You've been a college president. You've been a VP of various schools. Talk about a little bit about what's going on in higher ed, because we are facing what I like to think are unprecedented challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the challenges you think that are really sticking out for higher ed right now?
Well, you said it so well. Unprecedented is exactly the right word to describe. A lot of institutions are really thinking through their fiscal viability issues right now. So let's talk about just a couple of things in the landscape that's occurring. There have been about 100 mergers and acquisitions of institutions in the last couple of years. About 30% of the university presidents will transition out this year. That's up from about 10 to 15% normally.
That's a big one.
It's a dynamic, challenging environment for many of these institutions. The demographic shifts from 2008, when the economy tanked, the birth rate also tanked. And so all of those high school students that should be graduating now aren't there.
It's fuzzy math.
So universities are all competing for the same really good students, and many institutions have huge infrastructure challenges. So it's a busy time. There's a lot of regulation, a lot of state politics that presidents are dealing with, some not so fun. And so it really keeps people up at night.
You know, we've spoken with, over the last 3 years, we've spoken with 220 something presidents. In fact, we wrote a book. It's sitting right over here called Commencement, Beginning a New Era in Higher Education. So we took the first 125 and everything they had to say about the future of higher education, we put into a book. And there are some common themes. One is that it is really, really hard, maybe harder than it's ever been to be college president. And you better have your heart in it, and you have to be more than the face of the university. You have to live it, because you're not only competing for students, you're competing now against the messaging that a higher education doesn't have value. Is it the hardest time? You were a college president. Is it harder now than it used to be?
Yeah, it is, because there are so many different stakeholders and everybody has such high expectations. So, from donors to legislators to federal policymakers and corporate executives and so on. So I also find that an exciting time. A lot of people said to me during the pandemic, gosh, aren't you, because I left Drexel University just before the pandemic hit, but then I was consulting full-time all during the pandemic. Somebody said, gosh, aren't you glad that you're just not a university president? I said, no, I feel completely different, the opposite, that this is a time when staff and students need solid leadership and good communicators to say, it's going to be fine. Here's our strategy. Here's the direction that we're taking. And so I think it really takes great communicators and leaders that can absolutely focus and make the difficult decisions. They're not always very popular, but you need to know that your leaders are making tough decisions for the future.
Which is interesting, because you just said, and I agree, that there are more presidents leaving the profession or transitioning out. But what you just said is that this is a time of, you need stable, rock solid leadership. Those are, what do you call it? Cognitive dissonance. Isn't that cognitive?
Yeah.
How do we solve that? Because that's a really, what do we do?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of presidents really aren't prepared. They come up through very, very traditional academic ranks. And so they're not prepared to deal with all these diverse stakeholders and $1 billion in deferred maintenance on the campus and the buildings, and board members that sometimes go awry.
Oh yeah.
So it becomes a challenge, and honestly, things happen. This is not a type of position where you go to bed at night and sleep well.
No.
Something goofy is going to happen while you're sleeping.
Oh,
You're going to have to deal with in the morning.
You're a college president, and you could think. If you think you could sleep through the night,
I don't think so.
That's a good one.
So you work with leaders all around the world.
I do.
Through in the U.S., in other countries. Can you give us some examples of innovations? And so what's happening out there innovatively, and what can we in the United States learn from what's going on overseas? Because I feel like we're stuck in our own, our own thought processes.
Yeah, you're so insightful, honestly, because usually it's the other way around. People are talking about, what is it that we can offer some of these other countries. But in the Middle East, for example, they have some brilliant work that is being done where the economic initiatives on the part of the country are being melded very closely to the kind of academic programs that they're launching. They have a very clear focus and perspective about the new leaders in the country in terms of what they need, whether it's engineers, whether it's software engineers.
I think about India. India is like, they're just so aligned with workforce integrity.
And India's just on fire right now in so many different ways. I work with a number of different Indian companies, have for many, many years. I have loved working with teams from Tata, FirstSource, and others. And part of that was, when we wanted to do a lot of work, we were launching some new cybersecurity programs, and they sent a team when I was the president at University of Maryland Global Campus. They sent a team that worked 12 hours in the U.S. for us. They handed off the work to India. They worked all night, 12 hours, their daytime, our nighttime. And so we literally had 24 hours a day of production. So there's so many new models. I was talking to my colleagues here in Africa, from South Africa, and a couple of years ago, they're having a difficult time because broadband wasn't expanded as much.
No.
COVID really helped a lot of these developing countries because they had to move quickly in the space. Their greatest challenge right now is that students and families pay for the data. So now they're trying to rectify that. But we've jumped generations of technology in a relatively short period of time. So COVID did us a world of good in some ways, and in spite of the fact that it was a catastrophe in others.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Talk about there's international collaborations, which I feel in the U.S. we're becoming aware of the fact that we need more international partnerships. And I think there's only a few institutions that are going down that road, but I think many are starting to think about it. You've got the 3-year degree in the UK, and it's like, why can't we do a 3-year degree? Why is it so hard for us? Who is standing in our way? And it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel, right? It's not like we're blowing up some standard of some kind. Why is it so hard for us to experience the type of innovations that another country could do no problem?
You're so right about that. And honestly, I ask myself the same question sometimes. It's so difficult to get faculty and staff and people to focus around this. It would reduce the cost of education. There are other innovative models. I know you might ask me about this later, but there are other innovative models like 4+1, where the students get an engineering degree and a master's degree at the same time. Or there's a new model that Thomas Jefferson University. I'm a trustee at that university in Philadelphia.
We interviewed their president.
Yes, we did.
Thomas Jefferson.
Did you? So I'm a trustee there, and so one of the things that we looked at was because of the nursing crisis that we have, the students who finished a bachelor's degree someplace else in psychology, anything, business, anything, can come back and in 15 months can get a bachelor's degree in nursing because they've done all their gen eds and everything else. So these individuals have 2 bachelor's degrees, but they're golden in a work environment. I asked the woman who was head of nursing for 18 hospitals. So out of all these nursing programs, which individuals perform the best on the job when they come out. And she said the individuals who had a previous bachelor's degree, because they bring psychology, they bring business, they bring a whole different perspective. So there's some really innovative models, but I love your idea about a 3-year degree. There's no reason why we couldn't do that, but it takes leadership and it takes faculty and staff to adjust their model in order to get that done.
And isn't that the hardest thing to do, what you just said, adjust the model? All right. So I do a lot of talking around. I've worked in higher ed for 20 years. I work at a university, and people will ask me, what's one thing we can do to increase enrollment? I say, look at the calendar. Just look at the calendar and don't do everything on the agrarian spring, fall, summer, spring, fall, summer. Go to monthly starts, go to non-standard term, go to non-term. Right. You can update your financial aid. You have to update your SIS to go along with it, but it's not impossible. Universities have been doing it for a long time. Why is it that there are such divergent models in higher ed? We got some like Global Campus at Maryland. We've got National University in San Diego. Where I got my doctorate, North Central University, before they were bought out by National, had 52 start dates a year. It could start any Monday. The model's out there. What do we need to do? And I guess the two-pronged question, what do we need to do to increase the finances of our institution by looking at those types of innovations? Knowing that if we don't, what gets hurt is faculty quality of education and student support services. We're in this vice grip.
Well, if you provide more options for the students, you're going to generate more revenue. So it's not mutually exclusive. And now they might not be able to start every week.
Sure.
But just having multiple starts during the year, what drives the cost are the faculty members, and so there are load issues. So you do have to watch how many courses they can actually teach. Sure. So that's going to drive up the cost. But the greatest cost contributors to education are how many students you admit in a course, and number two, how much you pay the faculty. So more institutions have used adjunct faculty, but that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes they're some of your best teachers. Yeah. They're not doing research and publishing and other things. They're really just teaching the students, and they bring great real world experience into the classrooms. So I mean, you clearly know this. There are many opportunities. We had to struggle at Maryland. We had to struggle with the whole financial aid structure of that, but it's absolutely doable. And when I first said, we could do 8-week courses, you would have thought the world was ending.
No way. 8-week courses.
Not possible. But what we learned is that students might take fewer courses so they could do well, but they could stack them so they could still take a couple of courses in a term.
It also helps businesses with tuition assistance, and there's so many good reasons to look at the calendar and innovate through that way. But we do know that there's financial strain. The vice grip, like I said, it's what do we do when we're dependent on tuition revenue? And when we don't have enough tuition revenue, what do you start cutting? You start cutting, people, but so higher ed's a funny business, because all of your fixed costs come after your revenue projection, then your fixed costs come, and then when your revenue projection doesn't get where you want it to be, you've got all this fixed cost that you can't unload as fast as you load it up on it. And that's why schools are closing. What are you seeing out there from who you're talking to, and what can be done to mitigate some of that?
Well, we're working on new business models. That's primarily what I'm working on with presidents and boards. So the old business model doesn't work. You can't just keep raising tuition and fees. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. Anymore. So getting them out of that mindset to say you need multiple formats, you need online, you need shorter terms and programs, and you have to align your programs to what industry needs. Yes. And I'm just shocked that schools and presidents, they'll go and ask a company for money for something, for a donation. They never ask them what their most critical human capital needs are. Yeah. Over and over again, they do this. And so couple times, let me just tell you about a couple of innovative ways in which this has worked, which means you have to think about the fact you can't have a whole long semester. No company wants their employees on the campus. Number one, it takes them away from their billable hours.
Yep.
And number two, they don't want to spending 5 years getting a degree. They need the credentials and the skills and knowledge immediately. So when we launched the first cybersecurity programs in the country in Maryland, I didn't know whether cybersecurity was one word or two. I knew nothing about cybersecurity.
I like that.
So I'm wandering around with all these defense contractors and people in the federal government, and I said, "Tell me what your most urgent capital needs are." And
Great question.
everyone said cybersecurity.
That's a good question.
So
They might still say it.
they would still would say it.
Yeah.
So I went back to the campus and said, okay, I'm going to create a think tank because some of the smartest people in the country, they're going to help us. So you come up with a straw man curriculum. This think tank, I'm going to pay them, but they're all going to come together. And oh gosh, they tore up the curriculum. It's like they just ripped and shredded it and said, no, this isn't what we need. Yikes! So the faculty were a little upset, but what they did was really give us what industry was desperate for. And then I had our staff working overtime to just get the curriculum that they suggested. I pre-sold all those courses for the first year because the industry needed it so desperately, but we created shorter terms. They told us what sequencing they wanted for the courses because there was certain knowledge they needed up front. So we changed the sequencing. We were literally flying the airplane while we were building it. I said, I want 3 courses ahead, but we only need 3 ahead. And then, so I pre-sold all the seats. So by the end of the second year, we had 5,000 applications, 3,500 students in class, no discounts. No discounts. And it became 4% of our global revenue by the end of the second year.
Bullseye.
Amazing.
What I love about what you just said is you described what I think higher ed still fails to do, which is when the company comes to you and says, you can't sequence in this way, you got to rejigger it the way we need it. We sometimes, higher education as an industry, will go, well, we can't, that's not the way we've designed it. We can't do it that way. This is the way. And the company goes, well, I'm not going to work with you then.
Right.
I'm going to go work with one of the other hundreds of institutions that can do exactly what I'm asking for.
Exactly.
Right. And we have to forget we're one of many, not one of one. And when you start to realize that our main competition is not for the student, that's the secondary. It's convincing the public that higher ed still matters so that we have enough students in the pipeline, which is, anyway, you get me started.
You're exactly right. And the companies paid the tuition.
Right.
For these employees. And so when I went to Booz Allen, I said, so you're bringing all these people in from all over the country to sit in a classroom for two weeks at a time while you're teaching them about cyber. Why are you doing that?
You have to be crazy.
It's the 20th century, right? 21st century. So they realized that they could still have their employees in billable hours.
Right. And
didn't have to pay for all these hotels and everything. They were spending millions of dollars on that. So they were really happy. And we gave them first up seats in a lot of places. There's some new other innovative programs. If we just listen to what the employees are asking for, rather than try to jam what we currently do down their throats, it doesn't work. So we launched at Drexel, just before the pandemic, we had launched master's degrees in drug discovery in the medical school and clinical trial research. Gosh, we were just on time on that. And there are new ones on molecular incidents in cancer and things like that. There are just so many innovative programs that we're doing now. If we listen to what the market needs.
You're so right. Listening. Speaking of listening, and I'm going to have you take this whatever direction you want, because we're living in some very volatile times in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, students, the Supreme Court decisions. It's like things went one way, and like anything, there's elasticity in public opinion. And it's like, if I was a college president today, or I'm high level enough, so I think about this a lot. How do I respond to some of this? What do I say? How do I maintain some of the balance of belonging, diversity, and equity inclusion when some outside forces are saying you can't do this or you can't do that? It's a really funny time around words and words mean a lot. And as a college president, or any leader over students, what you say and how you say it can really determine your fate one way or the other. What do you think about all of the social issues going on in higher ed and how that's impacting leaders?
Well, I didn't get as exercised in some ways as others did, because if we have a value set that says we want our students to have a diverse environment when they're coming to our school, we've been working on a lot of initiatives for many, many years. We know, for example, if we want to have diverse physicians in our medical schools, we got to start in the 8th grade.
Oh yeah,
we've got to give them what's the pathway for how you get there. We have to create partnerships with high schools where maybe we teach a course on the high school.
Nailed it.
We go to low-income neighborhoods, first-generation student neighborhoods. We're going to get the diversity of students. We're already doing that, but a lot of schools have not reached out. The elite schools are, might have some difficulty with this, but many of us have had partnerships with community colleges. We've reached out to high schools in low-income areas to say, let's give you a dual credit for your advanced placement courses. But we have to start earlier, like in junior high, to give them the vision. They don't know the game plan.
Yeah, I love that.
They don't know the steps they should be taking. So if we can say, if you want to be a doctor in your community in the future, if you want to be a nurse in your community, if you want to be an engineer, here's the pathway. Here's what you have to do. Here are the steps you need to take. And here are the people that can advise you to do that. The other thing we need to do is to really enhance the qualifications of our advisors and career counselors. They're used to working with certain high school counselors, work with certain institutions. They don't know everybody that's out there to help them. We really need to educate them and step up their game, because they're only referring students to certain institutions, not to a variety of things. I think if we're committed to diverse values and diversity on our campuses, we should have been working on these things for a long, long time.
So well said.
And a checkbox on an application shouldn't have a great impact on us. We should be doing what's right anyway.
Epic.
Well, Susan, I have to say, there are, I think, a couple of times that you said that what I was saying was insightful, and I didn't know if you knew this.
I am the smartest man alive!
I couldn't figure out I promised Elvin I would work it in. In all seriousness, that's not true. But I had to push the button. Talk to us about your consultancy. How do we get a hold of you? If you've sparked our interest and said, I need some help right now, where do we find you? How do we get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm, Dr. Susan Aldridge, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Probably that's the fastest way to find me. I'm honestly, I love working with institutions. It's such rewarding work, and this is a challenging time. But sometimes we have to just tell everyone. I was joking earlier, and said I have to start every meeting with saying, "I'm going to dispense meds if you all don't calm down," because everybody has their hair on fire.
We're in this one together.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Everybody has their hair on fire about everything. You can't just be neurotic about everything. We have to get our teams focused and calm down and do the right thing for our students and make sure that we're giving them an education and that their jobs at the end of the day.
Yes.
A lot of this legislation that we're looking at, it may end up being a big bureaucratic mess, but what's behind it are things that we should be focusing on anyway. Like, are there jobs for our students? Are they coming out with the skill sets that they need that, have a great job? And are we doing right by them? So I tend to not get too neurotic about a lot of these things. We got to do the right thing for our students anyway.
Oh, well said. And what an honor to have you here. If people check out your background, you'll know why I say it's an honor. You've done some very innovative things. Really, we feel very privileged to have you here on this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, your guest today, she's Dr. Susan Aldridge. She's Senior Executive Higher Education Consultant. You can find her on LinkedIn. If you want somebody to give you some insight, please contact this young lady right here next to me, and she is going to give you amazing insights. When she left, one of the institutions you work for had 97,000 students. 97,000 students. I can pretty much tell you, if you're listening to this, chances are your institution does not have 97,000 students, but Susan can help get you there. Did you have a good time today, Susan?
I had a wonderful time. Thank you both so much. You're just wonderful hosts.
And ladies and gentlemen, you know what you have done. You've just EdUp.